Lords and Ladies by Terry Pratchett. There are many recipes for the flat round loaves of Langres dwarf bread, but the common aim of all of them is to make a field ration that is long-lasting, easily packed, and can disembowel the enemy if skimmed through the air hard enough. Edibility is a kind of optional extra. Most recipes are a closely guarded secret, apart from the gravel. But it was miraculous, the dwarf bread. No one ever went hungry when they had some dwarf bread to avoid. You only had to look at it for a moment, and instantly you could think of dozens of things you'd rather eat. Your boots, for example, mountains, road sheep, your own foot. Welcome among
Rolistes.
Some of you listeners might know about the subject of that episode. It's in the title, of course, but I ask a few questions around about it. This episode is going to be about food. I have with me my wife, Persephila, and I also have Ray with me.
Hello.
So you two, do you know why I decided to have an episode today about food?
Food's everywhere.
Really? MasterChef is back. It's MasterChef. It's a big event here in the UK.
Yeah, John Schroed and Greg Wallace. Excellent.
Yeah, cooking doesn't get tougher than this. I mean, it's important in the UK because that's the only thing I can discuss with my colleagues. I'm not in football,
Okay.
so it's perfect.
There's the weather and food. I can see that.
Rachel, where are you from?
I'm from Lincoln, historic town in the Midlands.
How did you ended up in London?
I came to London to work at a museum. Came here via Swansea, where I studied Egyptology.
Nice. Persephila, can you tell why and how you came to London?
I followed you.
Yeah, but maybe you can give a little bit, a little more details.
I took the Eurostar.
Oh, jeez. Okay, are you part of any club here?
Yeah, I'm part of the Phoenix Games Club that meet in Plaistow on a Thursday, and part of the Indie Meet group that meet on a Saturday once a month, and then irregularly throughout the week, twice during different weeks during the month.
Is it only tabletop RPG at Phoenix Games Club, or is it board games? Or...
No, Phoenix is board games, it's magic, it's tabletop, all sorts really, any game.
And London Indie RPG, could you tell a bit what it's about?
London Indie RPG was set up about 5 years ago by the Magus, and it's about promoting smaller press games, writing your own games, games that are diceless or GM-less. Dice light, I know, GM-less games, the classic one there being Fiasco.
I want to try that one, that seems very cool.
Fiasco is a brilliant game, and it's really fun to write as well, because quite a few of us have written our own play sets, and it's really fun to write and then play your own play set.
So what is Fiasco about?
Fiasco is basically a game that goes downhill, so think of a Coen Brothers movie. So it usually works best with about 4 players. You have a sheet that has information on it about your character, and you choose from a list of characters. You choose from a list of objects and a list of locations and a list of needs. And these are important to the characters, and you role-play based off those prompts. So anything can happen. Absolutely anything can happen.
I really want to try that one. Persephila, could you tell a bit about the club you're part of here in London?
Well, I'm part of the Rolistes francophones de Londres.
The guild.
The guild, yes. Well, I mean, you've talked about the guild already, so...
Yeah, but it's nice to have a different point of view.
It's a nice guild. There's lots of games. And I'm still running in an indie meat game, which is called Stalker, based on the Roadside Picnic book written by two Russian writers.
Strugavsky. I'll put the details in the description. Arkady?
And Strugav something.
Okay.
Which is lots of fun, and it's definitely a different way of playing because I'm used to rolling dice and looking at the MG and being like, okay, what do I do now? But now it's in indie, you need to have the answers and use your imagination, which is really nice. Be much more than normal.
You mentioned what you're used to play in tabletop RPG. Or did you get started in tabletop RPG?
You forced me. After a couple of weeks that we were just together, Kaloum here said, okay, tonight we're gonna make your character for Nephilim. We're gonna start playing in a few weeks. And I was completely clueless to what was tabletop role-playing games. I did hear about it before, but I never saw it happening.
Your brother was playing tabletop
He
role-playing.
was playing, but I was never there when he was playing. I knew he was playing, and my sister had a boyfriend who was like a LARPist, and he would spend his weekends making his Malian colder.
Is what?
His chainmail.
Chainmail.
Yeah, but yeah, I didn't know what was tabletop.
What about you, Rachel? How did you get started in tabletop RPG?
Well, I always remember in the stack of games that we had at the top of the stairs, there was a red box. And of course, it's the D&D red box that my dad used to play. And as a kid, I was always fascinated by dragons, and I read a lot of fantasy books. So we played Dragon Quest. When my dad DM'd it, and my mum played a dwarf. I played a wizard, and my brother played a fighter.
That's nice.
And that was really quite nice. And then in school, there was a D&D club, so was part of that. And then I have a gap. I didn't really role play until I came to London and joined the Phoenix Games Club and got involved in all sorts of games that I'd never heard of. So things like Call of Cthulhu, Seventh Sea. Scion was the game that I started running when it first came out. Yeah, Scion, it's a white wolf system where you're the sons and daughters of gods. It's a little bit like Exalted and a little bit like Aberrant.
So it's in the world of darkness, one of the many...
No, it's not in that world. It's completely removed from it. But it's all mythological characters. You play the sons and daughters of gods, run around the world dealing with the Titan spawn, the Titan problem. So yeah, very, very cool game, and that's my first game that I ever GM'd. Yeah, went from there.
How old were you?
22? Possibly.
Quite young.
Yeah, 22. In the same year, I started running games at conventions. So I GM'd my first game at the Phoenix for 3 weeks, and then went straight to Dragon Meet and ran my first convention game, which was crazy. An amazing experience running at a convention. It's such a buzz to do it, and I love Dragon Meet because it's such a friendly convention.
Big fans as well.
Yeah, so continued to run there for a couple of years, and then went to start running games at IndieCon and Conception. I ran Freeforms at Consequences, and now I'm running the RPG Zone at WinterCon. It's a multi-genre con, but we're aiming on getting lots of kids into role-playing. And last year we actually probably had about 200 kids that came to board game role-play over the course of the 2 days, which was just amazing. Just, first-time gamers.
That's really brilliant. I really like the concept of bringing board games and tabletop. It's just such a nice way for them to express their creativity and...
Absolutely. We weren't aiming at it specifically, because say WinterCon's a multi-genre convention, so there's cosplay, all sorts of different things. Last year we had a Batmobile and that kind of thing there. But it just turned out that there were lots of kids and lots of families, and they ended up coming over and just role-playing. And the wonderful people from Coffee and Dice provided board games, and my guys did the RPGs, so it was just brilliant.
Ophelia, you game mastered as well, all games.
Just one game. Judge Dredd. Yeah.
The old Games Workshop one.
Yes. I'm working on the second scenario, but yeah, I'm not ready yet, but it should be fun.
Okay.
I think it's a fun world.
I'm not holding my breath. Still need to get my XP from the first session.
Yeah, you'll get it.
XP.
Oh yeah, you can come.
London RPG. Let's get back a bit on the topic, which is food, for this episode. Rachel, why are you relevant to that topic, food and tabletop RPG?
I like eating food. I like cooking food. I like having friends over, cooking huge quantities of food and then role-playing or board gaming. And I think food's quite important to the whole RPG experience because you almost never play a game without eating something during it. And in the games themselves, who hasn't played a D&D scenario where you've started in a tavern eating that terrible bowl of stew with the really bad ale and the dwarf banging into you, spilling your ale, and that's how the adventure starts. I think everybody has played that start to an adventure. So food appears in RPGs all the time, and I just find it quite interesting.
What about you, Persophilia? Why are you such a relevant person to talk about food?
Like Ray, I'm a big foodie, love eating, love cooking, love baking. I have my food blog, which is Oysters and Milk.
What's the subject exactly of that food blog?
I had like a special upbringing where my mom was very France-oriented. There was lots of French cooking at home. We were big fans of England as well, and we would come twice a year to Canterbury and do some English shopping and like stopping on Tesco's on the way to the ferry and stocking up on muffins and mustard and mint jelly and mint sauce and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just my love for these three cuisines, Belgium, France and England. I just wanted to make like a little blog about that. But yeah, like Rachel said, I think that you can't do role-playing games without eating. There's always huge amounts, and I think one of our best tables was the Only Ring.
The One Ring.
The One
from
Ring, yeah.
Cubicle 7.
Yes.
Based on Lord of the Rings.
We played with 4 people.
Yes.
And 2 of them were baristas, so they were really like into food as well. The table was crazy. It was just like filled with like snacks and cakes and stuff and...
Sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
Actually, tabletop RPG in a way introduced me to better food. I had a friend called Steph who was really into both baking and cooking in general, and he was even cooking Korean food sometime, and at some point we would give a little contribution rather than order takeaway or something. We give it to him and he would cook each time for all of us. I remember one of the best thing he cooked was homemade eclair.
Ooh.
I remember him passing the eclair, all of us starting to eat them, and a big silence, which was only broken by him, who said something like, my icing is not perfect. And we were all, it's just so good.
Whenever you're cooking, there's always something that you could do better. Especially when you're cooking for a huge number of friends. You always want it to be perfect, and it's never quite perfect as you want it to be.
Sanguinaccio dolce. A classic Neapolitan dessert with almond milk. Easy on the stomach.
Sanguinaccio dolce. You have served me this before.
One of my favorite desserts. Traditionally made with pig's blood, in this case a local cow.
And when you last made it for me?
The blood was from a cow, only in a derogatory sense.
What do we usually cook or eat when we're playing tabletop RPG?
If I'm at home, it's always a stew or some kind of tomato and bacon soup, curry, Thai curry, Indian curry, Thai green curry. It was really successful, and I made a Thai green curry and then Thai potatoes, which are just the most gorgeous but really unhealthy thing to eat in the world. But cookies and cakes and that kind of thing always make their way to the table. I know a lot of people do fundraising through cookies and cakes and selling them at conventions now, which just attracts more and more people to eating the cookies and cakes and coming to find out what's going on with this cake. We must go towards it.
Any good memories of cooking or anything you're especially proud of?
I think I'm proud of the vegetarian shepherd's pie that they made from scratch, because we have one of our best friends who plays with us is vegan, so usually when we're playing with a large group, I always try to make a big bake, something that you can't do when you're just the two of you. So
it's nice to have something that you can prepare in advance and then stuck in the oven, and you let it cook while you start your game, and in the middle of it you take it out of the oven and you can eat, and it's easy for everyone. I mentioned eclair, but I did cook some eclair for Dungeons and Dragons. I was inspired by my friend, and I did my own. So a lot of baking also, chocolate mousse.
Yes.
Chocolate mousse, definitely.
Yes. Lemon drizzle cake. Oh, for the Star Trek game, you were not even playing, you were just baking in the background. You did lemon sticky, what was it?
It's a Nigella recipe with lemon curd and just like little lemon sponges. It's really good, yeah.
We mentioned LARPing, and that friend Steph, he had a recipe for LARPing, which I later did again also, which was really good. It was just lard and lentils. It had this salt.
Lard and lentils?
No, it's not lard, it's, how do you say that in English? Yeah, bacon.
Bacon. Bacon and lentils.
Yeah, bacon, sausages, onions and lentils, and that's really nice. You put it in a big pot, you go to your LARP, and then you can eat it like it. Some kind of... to be fair, in the medieval time, it would probably be an extremely wealthy person who would be eating that, but nowadays you feel like you're a commoner when you eat this.
Well, it's really interesting, the difference in when you LARP or when you freeform. When you're eating something while you're doing it, it changes the whole aspect of your character, because quite often when you're doing the food part of it, you're in character and sat around. Even if you've just got a tea or coffee, it changes the way that you do things and changes your body language and makes you think about more what you're doing in character, I think.
It's nice to have something in the hand, like a piece of bread, and lean onto the table. So tell me about those attacks which happened on the road.
Yeah, a horn filled with mead, something like that to wave around. We once did a freeform game where it was the ravioli was served halfway through, and after the ravioli was served, you could start to murder people off during the game and that kind of thing.
Did you poison the ravioli?
No, the ravioli wasn't poisoned, but I did end up poisoning a couple of people. It was really good ravioli that the GMs had actually made as well. So.
You said you were game mastering, and I was thinking that it's quite interesting to compare preparing a game session and cooking a dinner for people with this aspect of generosity and the amount of work you put into that to have people around the table. What do the two of you think about that?
Yeah, you've got to, when you're GMing, you need to have a basic scenario, even if it's a GM light game, like I run Legends Walk by Tim Gray, and that's quite a GM light game. It's all about player interaction. But you need to have the ingredients there, so you need to have the characters, and you need to have the GM, and you need to have some bad guys and a bit of plot, which is like the ingredients that you have for the dinner, having a basic recipe to follow. But I always deviate from recipes. I never ever follow them, and that's very much like my GMing style as well. I always deviate from anything I've written.
It's funny because I think the way you cook matches the way you run games, and the way I cook matches the way I run games, because I do follow the recipe.
Right, okay, yeah.
I'm very respectful of recipe. She's not.
No, recipes are there. They're more like guidelines, you know.
Well, it depends. I think you can go astray, but you need to understand what's actually going on, and it takes a good amount of time before you master. Like pastry, I find pastry. Personally, I find it's very precise, and you cannot. When you do a choux pastry, you don't really deviate and improvise the recipe.
Depends if you're doing a chocolate choux pastry. You can add little bits,
Well,
little bits of...
It's the pastry.
Yeah, the pastry. I'm not very good at choux pastry, I must admit, but I have done it before.
But you're not very good with the dungeon crawl eat.
I'm very good with the dungeon crawl, thank you very much.
I think I only did one game, but it's a lot of preparation. Like I'm doing now with my scenario for next Judge Dredd. It's a lot of preparation, and it ultimately is about having that pleasure with other people and having a good time. So that's food as well. When you're preparing it, it's just not for you to keep, but it's to share. Yeah.
People should be thankful for that, players. Do you know the song Hurt Feelings by Flight of the Conchords?
No.
I'll send you a link. It's one of the line is about how someone cooked a casserole and nobody mentioned it or thanked the cook for it. So thank your GM if they're preparing a game, or the cook if they cook it for you. Kiss the cook.
Kiss the cook.
And the GM.
Unearth Arcana, Official Advanced Dungeons and Dragons by Gary Gygax. Merlin's Sustaining Spoon. This unremarkable eating utensil is typically fashioned from horn. If the spoon is placed in an empty container, the vessel fills with a thick, pasty gruel. Although this substance has a flavor similar to that of warm, wet cardboard, it is highly nourishing and contains everything necessary to sustain any herbivorous, omnivorous, or carnivorous creature. The spoon can produce sufficient gruel each day to feed up to 4 humans. Creation requirements. Creator must be able to cast, create food and water. Caster level 5. Purchase cost 5,700 gold pieces. Creation cost 2,700 gold pieces, plus 1,080 experience points.
So that was pretty much real food for real people around the table. The other aspect of it is food within the game. Food we don't actually eat, but food we describe, food that our characters gonna maybe cook. Not so often. Although
Sometimes,
or well, most of the time, the sort of food that they're gonna run into. In Lord of the Rings, I remember was it called the lembas?
lambas are elven bread.
The elven
Yeah.
bread. That's something which struck me when I read that, because he spent quite a bit of time describing that bread which never goes bad, and
It's very important to the story as well, because they have it and that's what gives them the ability to continue
Yeah. At one point, it's the only thing that they're eating as well.
Yeah.
I remember also, I think it's Pratchett who had dwarvish bread.
Yeah, I'm reading Lords and Ladies, and I mention it. Like,
Yeah.
Lani York is bribing one of the dwarves and saying that she'll make some dwarfish bread with the litter from her cat.
My favourite line in Terry Pratchett is about the rat on a stick, because a rat on a stick costs 2 copper and ketchup costs 2 copper. Because have you ever tried rat on a stick without ketchup?
Is it something solved by cutting my own throat?
There's definitely that in a bar that Carrot goes to, and cut my own throat, definitely.
I remember the dwarvish bread is something which, it's a bit like the elvish bread, which is something you can take on travel with you, but that's a thing which will always remain in your ration.
Yeah, or double as a weapon, I believe, the dwarvish bread, yeah.
It does double as a weapon.
There's also in fantasy and sci-fi, you got a lot of descriptions of banquet. You got the Harry Potter banquet, you got the sweets. What's the name of the brand in Harry Potter? The Bertie Crochu in French?
Bertie's Magic Beans and Bertie's Magic Jelly Beans and the Hopping Frogs and Butterbeer.
I remember at the time of the first movie they would sell those.
They still do.
In sci-fi, in Star Wars, you got the blue milk. Now you got the 3 portions in the new Star Wars.
I think Deanna Troi eating that triple chocolate dessert in Star Trek.
Sunday,
Yeah, in Guinan's bar.
There's the plum egg soup also for Spock in Star Trek. The only thing you see it in the show is when he throws it at a nurse because he's having some kind of crisis. When we were playing Star Trek, that was an important moment. Going to the replicator, and I would have the sound of the replicator, and then they would order pretty much anything that they wanted, except the Vulcan, who of course is vegan, which was frustrating the players. It's weird that it was frustrated in game.
If you could eat any fictional food from a movie or a book, what would it be?
Oh, that's a really hard one.
That's an excellent question.
Yeah, I don't know, because there's so many things that would you dare to eat it? Like, my favourite set of films is Indiana Jones. I love Indiana Jones. My mum says me watching Indiana Jones as a very young kid is the only reason I went into ancient history and archaeology, and she blames it entirely. So there's that banquet scene with the chilled monkey brains and the python, and I love exotic foods and I love anything weird, wacky and wonderful. You know, I think I had my first snail at the age of 6 or something when my granddad passed me at a food market.
Really? Where was that?
We used to go to agricultural shows and they have food tents and they have interesting foods from all over the world, as well as, you know, homegrown stuff. And I remember eating oysters and snails and you know, all sorts. Lots of fish because my granddad loved fish. So the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom scene, would I dare to eat, you know, the chilled monkey brains?
Soup with the eyeballs.
The soup with the eyeballs. I don't have any problem with soup with eyeballs, so I might try it, yeah.
It's be very chewy, though.
Very chewy, yeah.
I don't know. Do you know what you would eat?
There was this movie with John Candy, Uncle Buck, and he makes like giant pancakes.
Yeah, but that's not fantasy also.
Okay, sorry. I would say, well, there was, I actually made it. There was the chocolate cake in Matilda.
Okay, yeah.
By this little kid who eats a slice, and then the headmasters makes him eat the whole cake. Delicious Magazine had a cake inspired by that. And we made it, and it was really heavy, actually.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to eat the whole cake. We already
just
made way too much for the
It
four of us.
was super heavy. Like, I think the icing alone was over 1 kilo or something.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was, but yeah, I don't know. Fantasy. It's hard to say.
I don't know. That's frustrating. I should have thought about that before. Really,
Okay, I think any banquet in the Harry Potter movies, that looks really good.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes Harry Potter banquet as a reference. I also noted Red Wedding, but although the food
not
was
the
maybe
food,
excellent.
yeah.
And also, I don't know if you saw the Hook movie with Robin Williams.
Oh yeah.
When,
Oh yeah, with the brightly coloured.
yeah,
Yeah,
where they like
definitely.
make believe that they're eating, and then the food magically appears on the table. And
Oh yeah. As a kid, I would have loved to eat something like that.
It's interesting in cartoons and children's things. You tend to have a lot of food and things like Ratatouille. I love the movie and the idea of him making the food, and Lady and the Tramp with the meatballs scene. It's just wonderful.
But actually, I know what as a kid I wanted for quite a long time to eat and taste. It's all the food in Dragon Ball. Because we had that as a show in the 80s in France and Belgium because they were translated. France is the second market for manga in the world after Japan. And part of the reason is that we had TV Kids show, and they started importing those way sooner than they did in other countries. And they were horribly dubbed, but there was Dragon Ball, and a lot of Japanese characters are often obsessed with food and often eat. And in Dragon Ball, he would have these ramen, he would have these rice balls, and very often those would be awfully translated and would just be called cake, etc. But you could see the shape of it, and it would look exciting. And I was over the moon when we went to Japan, and I had the chance to try most of those meal mochis, etc., which I would see as a kid in Dragon Ball. I mean, Piccolo in Dragon Ball the Demon has been locked for ages in a rice cooker.
Star Trek The Next Generation Technical Manual by Rick Sternbach and Michael Okuda. 13.5 Food Replication System. Food service on board the Enterprise is provided by a molecular replication system that can instantly recreate any of thousands of food selections at a moment's notice. This system employs transporter-based matter replication, which can produce, with almost total fidelity, nearly 4,500 types of foods, which are stored in computer memory. The heart of the food replication system is a pair of molecular matrix matter replicators located on decks 12 and 34. These devices dematerialize a measured quantity of raw material in a manner similar to a standard transporter. Unlike a standard transporter, however, no molecular imaging scanners are used to derive analog pattern data of the original material. Instead, a sophisticated quantum geometry transformational matrix field is used to modify the matter stream to conform to a digitally stored molecular pattern matrix. The matter stream is then routed through a network of waveguide conduits to any one of hundreds of replicator terminals located through the spacecraft. Such terminals are located in most living quarters, as well as in various lounges and common dining areas. The molecular pattern matrix controls the rematerialization process at the replication terminal, so that the finished product is a virtually identical copy of the original dish. The raw food stock material is an organic particulate suspension, a combination of long-chain molecules that has been formulated for minimum replication power requirements. Although the raw food stock is normally replaced as star-based resupply, osmotic and electrolytic fractioning of wastewater allows to up to 82% of food stock to be reclaimed. This system is relatively expensive to operate in terms of mass of the hardware involved and the energy cost of operation, but it is a significant saving over a traditional food storage and preparation system.
You mentioned Nigeria, the goddess of food here in the UK. That brings to the subject of the UK and food. Rachel, as a Briton, what would you have to say about food in the UK?
We love our food, we talk about it, we watch programmes about it and then talk about having watched programmes about it. It's the one thing that tends to bring a lot of people from different walks of life together, so even if they're football fans, they've watched it or been forced to watch it by their partners. Everyone talks about it at work. Things like the Great British Bake Off, MasterChef. My personal favourite is the Hairy Bikers, because following them around and their tours all over the world and the great food as well.
Can you describe a bit the Hairy Bikers, who they are, for listeners from, I don't know, Brazil or the US or France?
The Hairy Bikers are two big blokes who go around on motorbikes and make food in interesting locations and just have a joy of food and travel and their motorbikes. But they're two very large blokes, and they've released lots of cookbooks based on their travels to different parts of the world, and it's just a joy to watch them enjoying travelling and food.
Yeah.
You like them too, but
I really like them as well. I think they're very passionate, and it's always a joy seeing them cooking, and they can be so excited when they're making a recipe.
It's a funny comedy act sometimes as well, a double act.
if you introduce me to a comedy show about food.
Yes, called Chef with Lenny Henry. It's quite old. I think it's from the 90s. It's played by Lenny Henry, and he plays Chef Blackstock, and he has his own chateau with a Michelin-starred restaurant. It was well before Gordon Ramsay, and he likes to insult his staff, and he always has all these stuff happening. And
there's a bit of banter between the French, well, he's cooking French cuisine and British cuisine, and he's got a commis assistant who joins, who's absolutely not trained. I believe he's from Brixton, but he's from a very Jamaican background. Basically, it's Lenny Henry yelling at him most of the time. But the early 90s show, mid 90s.
Definitely, yeah.
There's some good comedy things about food though. I love Dinner Ladies with Victoria Wood, and it's a series set in the canteen of a factory. Victoria Wood is just the most amazing comedian, and the whole cast around her, and it's just about them with deliveries into the canteen kitchen, what happens in the canteen, what happens while they're making toast, and the toast always breaking and all that kind of thing. But it's just really funny situational drama.
It reminds me of two things from other UK TV shows.
Toasting is the game.
Yeah, Toasty Toaster from Red Dwarf. It's just a talking toaster, which gets fixed at some point because broken because somebody threw it at a wall. It's just a toaster obsessed with toasting anything from you. So it keeps asking people, speaking of canteen and cooking for people, that's quite a big part of Downton Abbey as well. The dinner, the staff in the kitchen, downstairs. I remember an episode where, something you get mixed and there's too much salt in it, and then there's the lady of the house saying, everybody drop their knives and forks. Yeah, lady, you're going to bring me fresh fruits for everyone, and you take this back to the kitchen.
I think the banquet scenes in Downton Abbey, because they dress for it and have drinks before it, and it's all served properly. And then when you see the panic downstairs with all the staff and the chef, and it's really interesting. And some of the recipes that they managed to make with such minimal equipment and fridges and things like that, it's quite amazing.
Have you seen the show Back in Time for Dinner?
The BBC.
No.
So Back in Time for Dinner, it was a family, a couple with 3 children,
Yes.
2 daughters and 1 young boy. And the concept was over several weeks. Each week would represent a different decade in the history of the UK, starting from the 1950s, right after World War II. And the concept was that every day they would pass 1 year or so, and they would remake their kitchen and interior like those decades each time, and they would have to eat what people wrote they'd been eating in those times on a national survey which was made. So very precisely they got notes of people all over the UK saying, today I had a piece of liver with this and this and this. Boiled potatoes. And it's fascinating because, as you said with Downton Abbey, you don't realize what was things like before a fridge, what were things like before an oven, which you didn't need pieces of wood or coal.
Well, I think the 50s was the one that we really liked because there was food rations until 55, and there was they just got 1 piece of meat for the whole week, and they had this national bread which was dark brown and apparently horrible, and
apparently that's why Britons hate anything made by the government since the 1950s.
There was a programme, it was 1940 Street, I think it was, where they had the butcher, the baker, and everything from that period, and they had to make the national bread, and the baker, who was a baker in modern day, refused to sell it because he hated it that much.
Oh, wow.
I remember that episode in the 1950s when it was the birthday of a girl. So the concept that they had one piece of meat, was it per day or per week?
No, it was for the week.
For the week, and by pieces of meat, that was a piece of liver.
Yeah, it was like 500 grams of liver.
And apparently, according to the survey, the husband would come back at lunchtime to eat at home. That was very common at the time. So the wife would cook the liver and boil some potatoes with huge difficulties with a cast iron stove. And in the evening, what the children had when they came back from school, and it was the birthday of one of the girls, was a cold piece of liver. But it's also funny how each decade brought new stuff. The 50s is very difficult, then they finally get out of rationing. The 60s, that's when people start to travel. So Mediterranean food arrives in the UK, and that's something which amazes people. What's more common than Mediterranean food for us today? And so she cooks a spag bowl for the first time in the history, and she got to go to the chemist to get some olive oil because that's where you would get it. You didn't get it in regular shops. So the 60s, 70s, you got Indian food.
Yeah, and you also have like a whole chicken, which wasn't common before.
Yeah, it's the cheapest thing today, and at the time that was a very luxurious thing to do. So when you have deep frost stuff which arrive, that's when you got those things. So in 70s you got Bangladesh being independent, so you got Indian food coming, not with Indian colonies, but with Bangladesh.
And then you have the problem with the economy and women going to work, and so there's more and more processed food. And
you have to wait for the 90s to get sushi, and every decade brings something which you take for granted today. It's really amazing back in time for dinner.
It's amazing thinking of just what I've eaten in the last 2 weeks. So sushi, Indian curry, spaghetti, different pastas, and just how lucky we are to have it all now. And thinking, going through history, what we haven't had and when things have been brought in. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, I remember when I lived, after my architecture studies, for a while I lived at my grandmother's, and I would cook for myself. And I remember my grandmother telling me, "You never cook Belgian food." Because I would do rice or pasta, and that was just something she would never cook. That was something foreign for her.
Hello, my name is Dirk the Dice, from the Grognard RPG Files podcast. This recipe is taken from the RuneQuest Companion and features Woctopus cooking. Now, Woctopus is a kind of humanoid octopus. We will begin with the cleaned carcasses of about 40 of the hideous creatures. The various parts are hacked off and sorted. The gonads are beaten to a pulp and mixed with the ground livers of the Woctopuses or other beasts. This combination makes an excellent appetizer when served in cups made from the steamed sucker discs cut into rosettes. The remaining portions are best left in nets, submerged in a rapid river for several hours or days to remove the excessive salt. Be sure that no living creature drinks from the river closer than 100 paces downstream, as the salt will be enough to drive them into the proverbial 8 days of madness or death, whichever comes first. The briskets are braised and require a long simmering time, but will keep well afterwards with no other preparations. Kidney and hearts are saved for baking in a thin bread shell in the manner used among the Western peoples. Creamed brains. 40 sets of Woctopus brains, 80 pounds of chopped onions, 2 kegs of goat butter, 6 cauldrons of mushroom soup, see page 7, 80 bay leaves, 40 garlic cloves, 40 sprigs of spice root, no salt needed, pepper to taste, dried breadcrumbs, hardtack preferred. Remove the membranes from the brains. Parboil in fresh water for 1 hour. Remove,
cut into small fist-sized pieces. Sauté the onions and crushed garlic cloves in butter until they are transparent. Add brains and spices and soup. Stir in pepper, put into individual ramekins and sprinkle heavily with crumbs. Bake in copper bowl ovens for half an hour or until they are brown on top. Makes 280 to 320 servings. This is from Beat Pot's own cookbook. Now the secrets of water cooking are revealed, sharing these delicacies formerly reserved for lunar citizenry. Cooking doesn't get squelchier than this.
Nigella, we covered. We didn't mention Jamie Oliver. Big star also. Probably one which is the most known abroad.
Gordon Ramsay probably is quite well
Gordon
known.
Ramsay. We never cooked anything from him though. It doesn't feel like he's got recipe. We would have some book with with slur in it. Aston Blumenthal, we're a big fan of him too.
Absolutely, especially his fantastical feasts and the things he's done for that and the giant things he's done.
I prefer perfect, making one perfect burger, one perfect spiked bowl.
I kind of like the fantasy thing. I think he's a big kid as well.
Yes.
That's something that we can relate to, I think.
So you would like to try his breakfast, which was one single, what do you call Freddy's, but 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters in a plate.
I would love to try any of his foods. I think the thing on one of the fantastical feasts he did, was it an Alice in Wonderland thing? And he had a cup that had half hot and half cold things in at the same time.
Wow.
And he didn't reveal on the programme how he did it. That was like his secret. He did not tell anyone on the programme how he did it. And that would have been amazing just to try, and because that's quite a weird combination. It's about one side of the cup it's warm, one side it's cold.
Yeah, it makes me think. I mean, just Aston Blumenthal and his fantastical feast makes me think about
Willy Wonka.
And a chocolate factory. I mean, I think if I could eat anything, it would be, without turning into a blueberry, it would be the chewing gum that makes you have a whole meal. I don't,
Really? It sounds like something
I don't know, it really appealed to me, that one.
And the lickable wallpaper and that kind of thing. Yeah.
One last food star relevant to this podcast, since it's crossing the channel, Rachel Kuh. She studied cooking in France. She's part Malay, part Austrian. But
Yes.
she's Briton, beside that, as far as I know. She studied in Paris, and she had a little kitchen. So she would receive people at her home, a little French Parisian apartment, and cook for them there. And she got a bit of a reputation there. And she was noticed by Jamie Oliver teams, and she had her own show. And in her show, she explained classic French recipes, but with her own twist. We tried a few of those.
Quite a lot, actually.
What do you remember?
Well, the chocolate souffle we made from her.
Oh yeah, and matcha souffle.
Yeah, the chicken with lavender. There's like a stew with lamb.
Bouillabaisse.
Bouillabaisse, yes. Courgette comes from her as well.
Oh, anytime you come to dinner to us, you're gonna have courgette, which are cheesy puff pastries.
Yeah, choux pastry with cheese.
Sounds really good.
Any other chefs that you like?
Mary Berry, of course.
Mary Berry,
Yeah.
yes.
So explain who is Mary Berry, and go ahead and explain. Paul
Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood, of course, are on Great British Bake Off. Paul Hollywood is known as the Silver Fox. He does breads and things like that, mainly. Mary Berry does everything, and she just has a lot of cookbooks and is very good at what she does. I personally really like the fact that she labels all of her pans and all of her tins,
Yes.
so she knows exactly what measurements they are without having to measure it or look. She can just grab the right thing immediately out of her cupboard. Very
Yeah.
organised.
Very OCD a bit.
Yeah.
Well, Mary Berry is a sort of the dream grandmother of
Yes.
anyone around it. You mentioned you never had a chance to taste the food of Aston Blumenthal, although Aston Blumenthal's got a couple restaurants here. Have you tried any of the? Because we're very lucky in London. Not only we've got a lot of food markets. We are recording this at the Royal Festival Hall, and right behind it, we got a food market which is not bad. Not the best in London.
Not the best in London, but still very good.
What's your favourite food market?
Borough Market. Has to be Borough Market. I love it. I just love walking around it and seeing all the people buying different foods and just smelling everything and tasting everything. It's just a wonderful place to be around. And then the food that you can buy there is just gorgeous. So yeah, I love Borough Market.
We tried, not too far from here, the Maltby Street. Very good one. Have you ever been there?
I've been there.
So quite nice also. There's many of them.
Greenwich Market as well?
Yeah, Greenwich Markets, lots of interesting foods, sushi and Japanese. I love the teriyaki.
You go there just for that?
Yes.
and the korokke.
The korokke, the pumpkin pan fried.
Yeah, pumpkin korokke, yes, definitely. I love pumpkin, so yeah.
We noticed the weather was getting slightly better before it went wet today again. But we were like, oh yeah, we need to go to Greenwich now. The weather's going to be good. You go there, then you go in the park of the observatory, and that's just awesome. When the weather is good, Frank's Cafe is really nice also. Ever been there?
No.
It's in Peckham. It's just the rooftop of a car park, a disused car park, and just the complete rooftop is just big wood tables and benches, and you can have cocktails, and you have very good food there, and you got an incredible view over London. Okay. Have you tried any fancier places in London?
Fancy places. I've been to Archipelago, which is basically it's the exotic foods. So I had kangaroo, crocodile, bees, ants, mealworms, python I think we had there. So yes, lots of exotic meats and different things.
Very adventurous.
Yeah.
How were the bees presented?
They were on top of an ice cream. So it was honey ice cream and then a couple of bees. And the mealworms were amazing because they were in a kind of toffee sauce, and they were just fantastic. And you had this coconut cream bellinis and mealworms and toffee sauce, and that was the dessert. It's really good.
I tried grasshoppers recently. Someone brought some from Latin America at work, and it was okay. I mean, if I turned off part of my brain, I think I could eat those as any sort of crisp.
Any restaurants that you would go blindfolded to and eat whatever from the menu?
Ooh,
I mean, your go-to restaurant when you...
It's more go-to pubs, actually. Although there is the most amazing Turkish restaurant that's just opened in Greenwich, and I would eat anything from there because it's just gorgeous food. But pubs, gastropubs, things like the Union in Greenwich, which is attached to the microbrewery.
Oh yeah.
Meantime microbrewery.
Okay, yeah.
And the Sunday lunches they do and the burgers they do are just fantastic. And they have a beer garden as well, so in the summer.
Yeah, I think we had a beer, but we never ate there, actually.
Yeah, we considered going there because they had lobsters at some point, but we never did.
Nope.
My very favorite burgers in London and in the world are just next from here, the Royal Festival. It's Bleecker Street Burgers. It's just a food truck over there, but the meat is really good, and it's one of the few places where I find they do really medium rare. Because it's got a tendency to overcook things a bit here. Persophilia, we like to spoil ourselves with good restaurants in London. Maybe you can talk about that. Or your favorite fancy restaurant? Because we mentioned Aston Blumenthal. We treated ourselves with some Aston Blumenthal.
Ooh.
There's there actually some people may know, but lunch menus can be very cheap. I mean, cheap, not cheap, but
value for money.
Definitely much cheaper than like a menu at dinner. It'll be, I guess, a fraction of the price, and you could get. It will be very generous. I think like Ducasse Marcus does them and Heston as well.
So Alain Ducasse
Yeah.
at the Dorchester and Marcus Waring
In Marcus.
Knightsbridge.
So yeah, we've done a couple of those and they're really good. I would say my go-to restaurant where I would order anything from the menu would be Shack For You in Soho from a chain called Bone Daddies. They make lots of Japanese-inspired soul food. That's really brilliant.
We already mentioned them.
Yeah? Oh, sorry.
Oh no, there's no problem.
I've just thought where I'd go and order anything from the menu were Hackers.
Oh, yeah.
Which of course bringing us back to MasterChef.
Yes.
She won MasterChef
Thomasina.
and Thomasina won MasterChef, and I love her Mexican food. So
Let's go back a bit of MasterChef because we started with them, but we didn't talk so much about John Torod and Greg Wallace. It's happening right now, and a bit like there's two big cooking events, I believe, in the UK. This is a Great British Bake Off where they go under a tent in a big park. They bake there, so it's about bread, it's about pastries, etc. And then you got MasterChef, which is finer dining, but it's only amateur cooks, and they're gonna be selected to become and trained into something much better.
it's always fascinating to see the invention test. I think that's the most terrifying but also most interesting test, and that's where they get a box or a plate of ingredients and they have to make something of it, and I think it's now 1 hour and 15 minutes they have to make a dish in. And the current series, that's if you don't make it through the first round, which is the signature dish round, you then have to do an invention test. And I think that's terrifying, but also if you're a good home cook, that's what most of us do in our kitchens,
Yeah.
Find what's in the fridge and make something of it. So I think it's quite fascinating that they've decided to do that for this high-end cooking show as well. Like looking at Greg Wallace and his love of desserts.
Good pun.
Yeah, he loves his desserts, and seeing him encourage the contestants to always make desserts.
If you want to pass through doing a dessert, that helps.
But it has to be right, because if you do a bad dessert for Greg Wallace,
There's two aspects I really like about those two shows, actually, Great British Bake Off and MasterChef. The first one is that, unlike, because you got some equivalent in Belgium and France, but it's less about food, it's more, reality TV about contestants against each others. Yeah, the bickering. I don't see any bickering or so little in those shows in the UK. People seem to, even the contestant seems to stuck together and really want to support each other in doing very well. And even the juries, especially in MasterChef, John and Greg, you can definitely see that they are on the side of the contestant, and they often you see they are really concerned and they're not happy themselves, or they can be sad if something go wrong for them. I think it's a heartwarming sort of mood. And the second aspect I really love in those two shows, it's the diversity of people. I've been very unlucky this year with MasterChef because each contestant from the first round, which I really thought, I really want them to go far. There was a Welsh contestant, and there was a Polish contestant.
Oh, the poor Polish guy.
There was Rob and Kay, and the both. I know the Portuguese one went through.
Yes.
But that's so nice to see this. Yeah, see all the society is diverse, and I just love in Great British Bake Off the latest winner of the contest, which was Nadia, was just such a lovable person and character, and coming from a Muslim background, and again you see people from all over the UK, all over very different stories, all of that passing through their cooking. I think it's again very very heartwarming as a show.
Also inspires people because it's every walk of life, every different type of person. I mean, a couple of years ago there was that student that made it very, very far through, and she was doing her exams at the same time
Yes,
as
I remember that,
trialling to get through the competition. And it just shows that if you want it, you can do it, but also inspires people to cook their food because it's just ordinary people that are doing this extraordinarily wonderful food. So it gives people the push to try doing it, I think. And I think that's what Great British Bake Off has really done. It's made more people feel that they can try to do things.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this quote from Nigel Slater, who said the reason why everybody loved watching Bake Off it was because all the contestants were so nice, and the reason why everybody was so nice is because when you bake, it can never be something egoistical. It has to be something you're gonna share, because when you bake, it's something that needs to be shared, and you ultimately are doing it not just for yourself, but to share it with other people. And so intrinsically all these people are nice people, and they're like, I don't know.
Interesting theory.
Yeah.
Do you do cakes like that?
No, I would love to be able to make a croque en bouche though, because that would just be amazing. And
you know what? You should come over to our place. We can do choux pastry together and do the croque en bouche, because it's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work.
We should
Yeah.
do that.
A big choux pastry challenge.
Yes. Not a challenge. Okay, well, that leads into the usual homage at the end of the Rolistes podcast to the Weekly Planet podcast, which is the what are you reading, what are you gonna read. So here it could have been what are you cooking, what are you gonna cook. But what are you reading, what are you gonna read? Basically, it's called reading, but it could be anything. It could be what you play, what you're gonna play, what you watch, what you're gonna watch. So, Rachel, besides coming over to do croque en bouche with us, what are you reading and what are you gonna read?
Well, I'm writing a freeform at the moment, so a zombie horror freeform. So I'm reading lots of things by Myra Grant, who is just the most amazing author. She writes about a zombie apocalypse, but it has happened, and it's how what happens after it has happened and how they reclaim it. So it's like post World War Z, the book, not the movie.
Yes.
Not never the movie.
I actually listened to the book. I mean, there's like audiobook version of it, and it's brilliant. Nothing to do with the movie.
Nothing to do with the movie at all. Oh, the movie hurts.
Hey, I'm an Alan Moore fan, so I know about that.
So Myra Grant, who is just a fantastic author. I'm also desperately waiting for the next Steve McHugh book to come out, and he writes the Harlequin series, and it's about modern day, but all the gods exist, all the heroes exist, Avalon exists, magic exists, a little bit like a British Dresden Files. It's very good. And of course, I'm waiting for the next Dresden Files book to come out by Jim Butcher. It's just waiting for that. And then, anything by Elizabeth Moon, whenever I get a second, because I love her. She's a female army veteran, and she just writes the most amazing fantasy books. Thinking about it, she writes a lot about trail rations and how you look after people on marches and things like that, which brings food into it a little bit. But
nice.
A lot of Myra Grant at the moment.
But Sophia?
I mentioned Terry Pratchett's Lords and Ladies. So that's the book with the elves coming back and the witches fighting them off. It's always enjoyable, Terry Pratchett. But otherwise, I still need to finish The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Barbery, which is actually a French book, but I'm reading it in English.
Actually, that brings something else we did not discuss. You're part of the Borough Bells. So you mentioned Borough Market, so you're part of the Borough Bells, which is part of the Women Institute, which relates to food and...
Definitely relates to food. They were, one of their first assignments, why they organized themselves was to make jam with all the food during the First World War.
So explain the Women Institute, what are they?
They're a group of lovely women that make very nice things. If you go to agricultural shows, you quite often find one of their tents serving teas and coffees and cakes, buy their jams, that kind of thing.
So they've been around for 100 years now. They celebrated their 100th anniversary last year. So it's a charity. We try to bring women together and do fun stuff and,
What are you gonna read then?
One of the next books is by the very talented Jonathan Safran-Foer. Everything is Illuminated. I read Extremely Loud and Very Close, or Very Close and Extremely Loud. Don't know how it went, but anyway.
The 9/11.
Yeah, it's that book is about a little boy trying to find his father in New York. I mean, find him in his presence in New York. His father died in 9/11, which is a really touching book, and apparently everything Illuminated is his first book.
I'm not gonna mention what I'm reading.
Because you don't read.
Yeah, no, I don't read that much. And everything I mentioned in previous episode, I didn't have time to finish. But today I played 2 board games, which are very good. The first one is called Time Stories. It's a cooperative game. So you play a team of time travelers who come back to the same place in history to fix events, a bit like at Quantum Leap, because you incarnate someone at that time. And it's not really time, it's more setting, so it can be a zombie apocalypse, sort of. Yeah, the one we played was set in an asylum. I won't spoil it, and it reminded me a bit of games I used to play on the computer alone, click and point games. Just with the mouse, you need to find the item number 5 to open the door, and it's quite cool. And we had a very difficult enigma to solve today, but we did manage. But we failed the mission. So that's Time Stories, and you buy new stories. The other one we started playing today is called Fall of Magic, which is an extremely beautiful game. It's basically a scroll of fabric which represents a map, and you unroll it and you re-roll it as you travel along the scroll, and each person plays a character, but you create a story together as you come to places, and it's about you following a character called the Magus, who's having a journey because magic is just falling apart, and you just connect with the story. So the Fall of Magic, it's quite nice. And what I'm gonna read, I still need to read some scenarios of In Nomine Satanis Magna Veritas, French game which had an American translation about you play demons, so it's a bit like Good Omens by. I listened to a podcast and it made me want to reread V for Vendetta, which is very good, and I'll go back to the movie. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for letting me force you into this podcast, Persephenia.
You're welcome.
Thanks to the listeners for listening to that new episode. See you soon, stay tuned, and in the meantime,
good games.
This episode included Medieval Abstraction by Lucas Byrne and Miloslav Kolar, Ritual by David Zeste, and of course Sotao Franco, theme song by Bondedorol. I'm speaking very low because it's almost 3 in the morning and Persephenia is sleeping. It's not creepy at all. Sorry for the delay for this episode again. Thank you to Wolfish Hunger for his review of the podcast on iTunes. That really helps reaching new listeners, and I would be very thankful if more people could have a look at that. By the way, Wolfish Hunger, very appropriate for our special food episode. Thanks also very much to the patrons supporting the podcast via Patreon. Thanks to you, we've reached our first goal, and I've now purchased a second microphone, which would be extremely useful for the next episode. So it would be much more convenient for me to interview people, and I'm not spoiling anything, but for the next episode I'm hoping to have someone rather interesting and important to interview. Speaking of patrons, I will add additional material I didn't use for this episode, which is already very long as it is, in the coolest section of the podcast website, which you can access through the Patreon. So that will include, among other things, me reading additional text. I think the text I've been attempting to read, but I was not satisfied with my delivery. One was an extract from Small War by Matt Wallace, which is a short story you can find for free on the internet, and which is part of a series called Scene du Jour. So Scene du Jour, it looks extremely cool, and I recommend you check it out. Scene du Jour by Matt Wallace. It follows a catering business, but into a humorous contemporary fantasy setting, something like Dylan Dogs, but following a catering service, providing fancy meals for banquet, etc. So that seems quite cool, and I'll definitely check it out myself. So that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for listening, and see you in May for our next episode. I almost forgot. Thank you very much to everybody on the internet who made recommendation of food related stuff for this episode, especially the people of Discussion Rolistes on Facebook and the Kazun Snow website, and my Twitter followers. And finally, of course, thank you very much to Dirk the Dice from the group Nordwald for his rendition of the Woke Turkey recipe.
Nós é tipo bem Jesus, todo mundo a gente ama. Ainda mais se for gatinha, rola até levar pra cama. A gente topa tudo, sapatão e bigodudo. Na hora do piriri, cai em mim outra vesti. Vai, Batuque! Rolê, rolê, rolê. Solta o frango e vem com a gente. Rolê, rolê, rolê. Solta o frango e vem com a gente.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? Oysters à la parisienne.
Oui, ce sont des huîtres dans de la soupe au lait.
Ah, ça c'est étonnant. Oh là là. Attendez. C'est délicieux. Delicious. Mange mon fils. C'est délicieux. Mange. Que c'est bon. Voilà. Aïe aïe aïe.